Hi, and welcome back. In the last session, we covered the 5 different attribution methods that AppsFlyer uses. In this session, we're going to cover lookback windows. The goals for this session are to understand engagement lookback windows and why they're needed. We'll also run through several examples and analyze and determine the engagement which will get credit for an install. So let's begin. Let's start with a question. Let's say in this scenario, you have a user that clicked on an ad on day 0. And then 350 days later, they actually go back and download the app and open it. The question I want to ask you is, should this engagement get credit for the install? Now, if you ask the ad network, they'll most likely say yes. But if you ask the advertiser, of course, they'll say no. So this is why we have engagement lookback windows. The way engagement lookback windows works is as follows. When an engagement record is recorded in the engagement database, it is added with what we call a time to live. That time to live is actually equal to the engagement lookback window. And the engagement database cleans itself and deletes these engagement records after the time to live has expired. So that means if a click or an engagement happens and it has a 2-day lookback window, that engagement will only live in the engagement database for 2 days. Once the time to live is expired, that record will no longer be in the engagement database. So another way to think about it is that once the engagement is clean from the engagement database, there's no way to attribute an install to that specific engagement. Now, I know that can be a lot to consider, so let's look at an example here. Let's say that there was an impression, and that impression has a lookback window of 2 days. If that engagement or that impression happened on January 1st at 11 a.m., then the time to live will be 2 days because the lookback window is equal to 2 days. That means that the expiration date will be January 3rd, 2018 at 11 a.m. Likewise, if there's a click on January 3rd, and that click or that engagement has a 10-day lookback window, then the time to live for that engagement record will actually be 10 days, which means that it will expire on January 13th, 2018 at 10 a.m., or 10 days after that engagement was recorded. And last but not least, if you have a third engagement with a 5-day lookback window, you'll see that its expiration date is on the 10th because the click happened on the 5th. So because of the 5-day lookback window, the time to live will be 5 days. And if the user downloads and opens, then we'll have to determine which engagements are still in the engagement database and attribute the last click to attribute the last engagement with the credit for the install. AppsFlyer actually has 2 kinds of engagement lookback windows. They have what's called the AF Click Lookback window and the AF View Through Lookback window. Basically, how you can think about this is that you want to be able to set lookback windows for the different engagement types. Click engagements have a range of 1 to 30 days if you're doing it on a day time scale, or 1 to 23 hours if you're doing it on an hourly scale. We recommend a 7-day lookback window for clicks. View-through lookback windows are a little bit different. Those have a range of 1 to 7 days on a daily basis, or 1 to 23 hours on an hourly basis. And we recommend a 1-day lookback period for view-through attribution. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. Going back to the engagement flow or the user flow that you guys should all be familiar with by now. Remember, the ad network serves an ad. The user clicks on that ad. The ad network will record the click, and then based on the agreement that that ad network has with the advertiser, they will notify AppsFlyer of the click lookback window. In this case, the click lookback window is 7 days. For view-through attribution, it's pretty much the same. The only difference is that when the ad network notifies AppsFlyer of the engagement, they will pass the view-through lookback window, and they also must pass AppsFlyer a device ID. So let's run through some examples. In the first scenario, we have a timeline. And let's look at this timeline. There's only one engagement, and we'll call this engagement A. And what happened is the user clicked engagement A on day 0, they downloaded and opened. The question to ask now is, should this install get attributed to A or organic? In this case, the answer is A. It's because the user downloaded and opened the app right away. They downloaded and opened the app on day 0. So the default click lookback window would be 7 days, meaning that that engagement is still in the engagement database. Let's look at scenario number 2. And what happened here? On day 0, the user clicks this link. And if we look at it, we can see the click lookback window is 15 days. They download the app on day 0, but that app just sits on their phone and they haven't launched it. Finally, 16 days later, on day 16, they launch the app for the first time. Should this install be attributed to A or organic? In this case, the install would get attributed to organic. And the reason for this is that that engagement is no longer in the engagement database because the engagement has expired. Remember, the click lookback window was 15 days. So that means its time to live was only 15 days. But the user actually opened the app for the first time 16 days after the engagement. So when the AppsFlyer SDK called back to the AppsFlyer servers and asked if there was any engagements, that record was already deleted from the engagement database and no longer existed. So because it was no longer in the engagement database, there was no engagement that can be attributed to that launch. So this install went to organic. Let's look at scenario number 3. In this case, you can see we actually have 2 engagements. On day 0, the user clicks engagement A. And if we look on this link, it has a click lookback window of 15 days. So on day 0, they click this link and have an engagement and download the app. Notice they don't launch it, and then 4 days later, they're shown another ad. They click on that ad, where they are then sent to the Google Play Store. When they look at Google Play, they see that they have the option to either uninstall or open. They do neither. They actually just close Google Play. It's only 10 days after the first engagement that the user goes onto their phone and actually opens up the app for the first time. In this case, should the install be attributed to A, B, or organic? In this case, the install should be attributed to A. Now let's figure out why. Now, of course, engagement B was the last click prior to the open. But if we look very carefully, we can see the click lookback window is only 5 days. That means that the click lookback window, or the engagement for click B, expired on day 9, meaning there was no engagement in the engagement database to attribute to. So the only remaining engagement that was in the database was the original click on day 0 from click A, or engagement A. That means that this install will get attributed to engagement A. Scenario 4. On day 0, the user clicks and downloads. On day 4, they're served in an impression. And on day 10, they finally open. Would this be attributed to A, B, or organic? Looking at it, it's pretty easy to tell that this should be attributed to engagement A. The reason for this is that engagement B, which is an impression, expires after 1 day. Now, even if that impression had a 7-day lookback window and didn't expire until day 11, on AppsFlyer, clicks always supersede impressions, meaning that the last click, even if it was prior to an impression, will get credit for the install. Scenario 5. Now we're going to look at an hourly basis. An impression is served at hour 0. 4 hours later, the user opens up Google Play, searches for the app, and downloads it. And then 2 hours after that, they actually open the app. Should this be attributed to A or organic? And the answer is A. You can see that this engagement actually has a device ID, meaning that ID matching can be done for the impression. It's also well within the default impression lookback window. And because of all of this, that means that that impression would get attributed to that install. Number 6. There's a click on day 0. 4 days later, the user goes to Google Play and downloads the app. Then on day 8, they're served an impression. And on day 10, they finally open the app. Should this be attributed to A, B, or organic? In this case, it is engagement A. And for the same reason, it's because it does not matter if there was an impression more recent than a click. Clicks always supersede impressions, so that's why this click gets credit for the attribution and the install. Scenario number 7. On day 0, there's a click. On day 4, the user finally downloads the app by just opening up Google Play and searching for the app. On day 10, the user is served an impression, and that impression does have a device ID. And then on day 10 plus 2 hours, they finally open the app for the first time. Should this install be attributed to A, B, or organic? And the answer is B. And this is because if you look at this tracking link, even though there's no lookback window on there, when there's no lookback window, we default to the default amount of time, which for a click is 7 days. So because of that, we're outside of the lookback window for engagement A, or the click. And the impression is actually only 2 hours. The first open is only 2 hours after the impression. Therefore, the impression gets credit for the install. Now we're going to discuss assisted installs. You remember the example we did earlier in the course where we talked about how oftentimes users will engage with ads multiple times before they install? Well, in this, we're going to look at when this happens, how you can see the assists or the contributors and know which engagements will finally get credit for an install. So let's look at assisted install example number 1. And let's see what we have going on here on this timeline. On day 0, a user clicks on an ad. The click has a device ID, meaning that in this case, they could use refer, ID matching, or possibly even fingerprinting for attribution. On day 4, they go to Google Play and download the app. On day 9, they're served an impression. And if we look at the engagement, the impression engagement, it does have a device ID. And then on day 9, they're also served a second ad that they click on. And it's only on day 10 that they finally open up the app for the first time. Now we need to go through and figure out who will get credit for this install and who will be considered a contributor. So let's go ahead and see. In this case, the install gets attributed to C because it was the last click. And let's assume that it was attributed to engagement C with refer attribution. Assists will go to both B and A using ID matching. And this can only happen because those engagements had the device ID or the advertising ID associated with the engagement. Let's go on to assisted install example number 2. In this example, we see that a click happened on day 0. The user downloads the app on day 4. Day 9, they're served an impression. Day 9, they click an impression. And then day 10, they open for the first time. If we look at this, we can see that the install gets attributed to engagement C again. And assist goes to the impression on day 9. But engagement A is no longer in the engagement database. And the reason for this is that there is no click lookback window macro on the tracking link, meaning it defaults to 7 days. And since the first open didn't happen until day 10, that engagement record is no longer in the engagement database. So that covers all of our examples for lookback windows. I hope you're an expert on that now. Thank you, and let's keep on learning and keep on tracking.